Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out. I know you are welcoming the rain, so you don't mind whether you've got an umbrella or not. And thank you to my many friends and relatives who filled the hall. So great coming in.
Sounds like my comedy gigs.
I know, it was really wonderful meeting you coming through. It really fills my heart with so much pride to be back here in Colac, back at Trinity College. I don't recognise the place. It didn't look anything like this back in the olden days. The kids today thought they nearly fell off their chairs, Alex, when I said that I was here in 1979. They didn't compute at all.
Yeah, literally Helen said something like, there was no mobile phones, and then they said, how did you talk to people?
Yeah, so thank you very much. It's a real honour to be back here. I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with you. I operate on this ideal that community independents have, and that is, if we create respectful places, then people step in and start exploring ideas. They can describe the challenges that they face. They can describe the extraordinary opportunities, particularly the ones that we have in rural and regional Australia, and feel kind of safe to have different views and explore them. And I think that's what politics should be. And I think when you subscribe to a set of values that are about respect and inclusion and good behaviour, and as we say in Indi, being your best self, then we can really come together and get great things done for our nation. That's absolutely what drives me, and I'm so thrilled that it must drive you too, because you're here tonight.
Absolutely, and you've touched on it exactly, Helen. I'm going to ask you where you first became interested in politics, but for me, like a lot of Australian regional kids, it was the Year 6 Canberra camp. And as well as going to Questacon, you go to Parliament House, and I watched John Howard and Kim Beazley and the various people in there yelling at each other. And I said to my mate Andrew Porter, God, our teacher Mrs Nelson would get us in trouble if we acted like this. And then the second time I visited was last year, because I was considering a third tilt, but I wanted to talk to people like yourself, Helen, about whether or not you can get things done. So I'm so great you can pass that on tonight. But I saw the same thing happening, the yelling it across the aisle. Both parties didn't know how much their energy policy costed, and they were trying to embarrass each other. And my partner leaned over to me and said, are you sure you want to do this? And I said back to her, look over at the independents. And we looked over at yourself and the other people in the lower house who are elected by their communities as an independent, and you were sitting away, working, remaining respectful. It was a real inspiration. So can you tell us what it's like in this green chamber that some of us might watch on Question Time?
Yeah, I'd love to, Alex. And gosh, you were precocious getting engaged in politics so young. I was completely and utterly clueless at that age. And we certainly didn't go on a school trip to Canberra. I went to a tiny little primary school in Urack with, we had a top number. Occasionally we'd have 15 kids. Mostly we had 8 or 9 kids, and we were pretty happy if we got to the Colac swimming pool, quite frankly, or the Rokewood Sports. So there was no going to Canberra. So I really didn't pay that much attention to parliamentary politics, to be honest, until around 2012, 2010, around that time when we had that. Remember the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd years? Remember the rotating prime ministers? I remember just the appalling backstabbing and horrible behaviour in the Parliament. And then, remember when Prime Minister Rudd did the apology to the stolen generations? And I was teaching a stats class at Melbourne Uni to a bunch of really bored medical students who didn't really think they needed to know anything about stats. And we turned on the TV, we stopped the stats class to watch the apology. And I feel tearful even thinking about this, but our Member of Parliament at the time walked out. She wasn't part of that apology, and it really struck me to the core. I thought, why would you walk out on that? Why would you do that? And later in the day, the community in Wangaratta, where I live, came together in the park in town, and there was tons of people there. And there was the mother of one of our kids. One of our kids played in a band, and one of his bandmates, Luke Miller, his name is, his mum Marianne was sitting next to me, and I didn't know that she was part of the stolen generation. I didn't know. until she told me on that day, and I got to know her a lot since then. And that was the moment for me when I think I really became enfranchised. And I thought, you know what? If you want good representation, then you've got to stop sitting on the sidelines. You know, you've got to get involved. But I was a bit lazy. I didn't do much about it. But others did, and my family did, and then I kind of came along and got pretty excited about it. So it took me a long time, Alex. I mean, I was engaged in politics in that I love, I mean, here I am at Trinity College, former captain of the school and captain of the debating team.
On the honour roll over at the other building.
Like, I kind of like that stuff, right? Like, I did like debating and public speaking and doing those things, but I never saw it as a pathway to politics. And I observed politics through critiquing what I read and saw in the newspapers and on TV. I wasn't a watcher of Parliament, so I didn't know until I did how bad question time was. and Alex is right, it's really bad.
Yeah, goodness me. How do you then go out of the corridors and run into the same people in the corridors and discuss with them the laws that our country needs to be enacting?
Look, the thing is, you have to understand, folks, that the work of Parliament absolutely does not happen in question time. Question time is a piece of theatre, the whole press gallery are there, just like you actually. Sitting down here, it's like looking at the press gallery. There are people in that Parliament who are really only engaging in question time to get a grab for the 7 o'clock news. It is a piece of theatre. The real work of Parliament happens, of course, when we're debating legislation. I would argue the real work of Parliament happens, this is very, very detailed, but in the third reading of a bill when we're moving amendments. We could love to talk to you about that later. The real work of Parliament happens in committee work. The real work of a parliamentarian, though, happens here in the community. The real work of a parliamentarian is getting out every single day when you are not in Parliament and doing the highways and byways. Wannon is a huge electorate, so is Indi. There's 401 little towns in Indi. I try to get to them all. It's 126 schools. I try to get to them all. The real work of a parliamentarian is listening deeply to their community and working with the community to solve the problems that you have and take that to Parliament and use the parliamentary tools then. And question time, if you're smart about question time, you can be really strategic about the question that you ask. And this is where I just love being an independent and being on the crossbench, because there's all these yada, Dorothy Dix's attack questions coming from side to side. And there we are on the crossbench, in that beautiful sweet spot in the middle, just watching the ping pong. And then you hear the whole Parliament go silent when it's time for a crossbench question, because everybody knows it will be a fair income question. Like, it is, I really say to you, watch question time and wait for the crossbench question. We had to negotiate really hard, I might say, to make sure we got our fair share of the questions, but we do. And if you're lucky enough, you might even hear my old mate Bob Catter ask the question.
Who you did a little event with recently.
I did, because Bob, like me, is a passionate rural and regional Australian. We were at the press club together. And but Bob, there's a special rule in the Parliament, because Bob, we only have 30 seconds to ask a question, except if you're Bob Catter, you're allowed 45. And I reckon that's great, because Bob is the eldest statesman, and like, you may not agree with everything Bob has to say. I certainly do not. But I'm really good mates with Bob, because I've got a lot to learn from someone who's been in Parliament that long. So if you get to hear one of Bob's questions, everybody has a bit of a laugh, because those questions go anywhere. But crossbench questions generally are very tightly constructed, and you know that they're strategic, and you know they're not just a gotcha. They're actually there to find out something for their community. So you hear a crossbench question and they will talk about their electorate. And to me, that is what representation is about. It's about you representing your electorate, not kind of being a cheer squad for your party. It's about really asking the questions that matter.
That's absolutely right, and that's one of the great things about this evening is us finding out what an independent can do, because I think there's still a few myths around the power of an independent. So are you able to describe maybe a time, Helen, that you did hear from the community and that came through all the way to Parliament House in Canberra, and a question was asked that then got the wheels moving on something?
I can tell you a great story which I think would resonate here in a wonderful farming community like Colac. I pulled together a group of farmers and quite a big group of them together actually in Benalla, a town in my electorate, and we were talking about climate change and agriculture. And we had a lot of people there from Landcare. We had beef farmers and croppies and sheep farmers, a couple of horticulture people. There's a lot of mixed farming in Indi. And the question I posed to the group was, what kind of support do you need as we face a changing climate and as we're looking at a changing rural economy? What are the kind of things that would be helpful to you? And we kind of workshopped this over the course of a couple of hours. We had a picnic, of course, because it's community discussion. And the group came up with this idea that many of you would remember extension officers, dairy extension officers. These were the people who were trained ag scientists who would come out and translate the science into practical farming action. They were around a lot, and then they kind of got absorbed. They kind of went out of vogue a bit. And we talked about the big moments in agriculture have been the moments where agricultural extension officers have really worked with farming communities. In fact, when I married my husband Phil, he was working for the Department of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, which I thought sounded pretty sexy. It's changed its name a few times then, but part of that group was doing this stuff. So I designed a policy alongside these farmers around that we needed some kind of climate and agriculture extension officer. Anyway, I took that policy to the last election. I campaigned on it. I went after the election. I met with the Agriculture Minister, who was Murray Watt at the time. I asked questions in question time. I did motion debates talking about how this would be so useful, particularly in navigating things like carbon credit units, carbon sequestration. It's the Wild West out there. There's a lot of dodgy brothers, trading these carbon credits. We know that farmers will probably need to inset their carbon credits themselves rather than sell them on. Really complicated. Anyway, I talked long and hard to the Ag Minister. I asked questions in question time, did all that, and I got a call just before the budget, not the last one, I think the one before, to say, Helen, we've really taken on board your idea. And
you right? Oh, that's okay.
Oh, you're a bit thirsty,
right.
buddy. Yeah, it is dry
water. Is very important in the country.
It is.
As we all know, and we're good to be getting some of it out there at the moment.
No worries. So anyway,
nice.
we did that. I did that, and in the budget, Minister Watt rang me up to say, we're going to have this thing that you were asking about. We're not going to call them your name, Helen. We have to rebrand them as ours, because I don't care what you call them.
Seriously, to take credit for it?
This is how it works, right? You work with people. It's not about getting the credit. It's actually about working with it, and the people you represent know what you've done. Mm-hmm. So we have these positions now right across Australia. So I wasn't just campaigning for my electorate, I was campaigning for all of rural and regional Australia, all of agriculture. They're called Sustainable Agriculture Facilitators. There was over $300 million in the budget, and I met the first one in our region just last week. So I was just a really nice example of a rural voice, working with whoever's in government, because I really don't care, going in good faith with an idea that's come from the people. I also took it through the Parliamentary Budget Office. I did my homework, if you do your homework and you go in good faith, and you're not trying to do a gotcha, you can get really great stuff done.
That's really incredible to hear, and I think deserves another round of applause. Those policies born of community, taken into Parliament, and so many people are benefiting. And something I'm really excited for, is hopefully becoming the member, is politicians in 15, 20 years taking credit for good long-term decisions that are made today, and particularly when it comes to rural Australia, because you're a rural and regional independent. I'm hoping to become one as well, in which having two powerful independent voices speaking for the regions is massive, because we're big electorates, there's a lot to get around, and most of the electorates are in the city. And with major parties' proclivity to try and win elections a little bit more than potentially help people, a lot of attention goes there. And one thing I've been citing a lot recently is an amendment you moved to a housing bill as a good example of what an independent can do. And this isn't even in a minority government. This is just an independent talking to government and moving an amendment, never being in opposition to try and drag it down, but to make it better. Could you tell how you advocated for the regions in the particular housing bill?
Yeah, I will. Actually, I've got a few cheat notes here, because I just wanted to tell you about this. This is this business about, who has power, and this notion in kind of discussion about you only have power if you're in government. Let me tell you that if you engage in the parliament, like really engage in the parliament, like truly use the parliamentary tools, like if you wear out the carpet to a minister's office, and I'm going to tell you that in my time in parliament, I've met with ministers one-on-one 142 times. I've got friends on the backbench of both major parties who've never had a one-on-one sit down with a minister ever. And they tell me, like, they're really dirty with me. They're like, how come you independents get all these ministerial meetings? Is it because we ask for them and we're taking something to them? So I think the bill that Alex is talking about, you'd all know about this giant Housing Australia Future Fund. This, we've got this massive challenge as a nation, and it's not a challenge that happened 5 minutes ago. This has been 25 years in the making, where we simply do not have sufficient housing stock, either for people to rent, to buy. We certainly don't have enough social and affordable homes. So,
and housing in Colac in particular, I've found discussing around is still one of the big issues. And even today, a few of our volunteers went into a real estate office and asked, and they said there's no rentals.
No,
and in fact, there was someone fleeing a bad family violence situation. There's no place for them to go. It's really dire, and it's affecting locals as we speak.
Well, yeah. So anyway, we are debating this giant bill. Like, this is a giant amount of money. And so I took myself down to meet with the Housing Minister and to say to the Housing Minister, look, supportive of what you're trying to do. This is a huge amount of taxpayer investment. We've got to get it right. I want to know from you, how can I go back to my community and say to them that I've voted in favour of this bill and I've got a strong guarantee that some of this money, a fair proportion, is going to flow out into rural and regional Australia because, Minister, 30% of Australians live outside of the major cities. And I want to be sure that there is investment in rural and regional communities that's fair and equitable, knowing, as Alex said, that towns like Colac, you've probably got less than 1% vacancy. I know that's the case in Wangaratta, Wandonga, all of my towns, like just no rental. Anyway, we had a long talk. They, gave me plenty of time. Thanks, Helen. Not going to give you any guarantees. I said, well, what about how will we know how much money is going out into the regions? Well, trust us, it'll come. Don't worry. You know what? I'm a bit worried, Minister. And I said, well, what about representation on the Oversight Council? I've looked at the people. That's the other thing about being an independent. We actually read the legislation. So I know it comes as a real shock to my colleagues in the major parties. They're kind of the same, both sides. They don't read it. I said, look, there's no mention in the skill set for the Oversight Council of anybody with any expertise from rural and regional Australia. She said, of course we'll have someone. I said, I don't believe you. So I went away and wrote a private members bill which ensured that the object of the Act, and that's the bit, basically the top line saying what the hell is it we're trying to do here, included the words rural and regional Australia. I did a whole lot of work on this. I got nowhere with the private members bill because generally the government won't let you debate one. But I then moved a series of amendments in the House and I got lots of them up. I got an amendment that guaranteed that there would be someone with rural and regional experience on the Oversight Committee of the Oversight Council of the HAF. I've met this man now who thanks me very much for getting him a job. I didn't know him, but no, really, I met him to say, how's it going? So that was great. I amended the bill to make sure that in the annual report that the government of the day has to report every year how much of this big giant fund is coming into rural and regional Australia. And there were several other amendments. But it basically meant that it's the trouble with being an MP, you've got to kind of pump up your own tyres a bit. I don't like this. But anyway, here's the truth. Really, rural and regional Australia would have been missing in action on this if I hadn't done the work and if I hadn't taken the time to go down to the Housing Minister multiple times. And the number of times my hardworking staff are on the phone to the Minister's office just trying to make this stuff happen. I wouldn't have been successful, but I was successful. And the Indi, the member for Indi's name is all over that legislation because that was important. And it was important because I know there's doctors and nurses and childcare workers and aged care workers who'd love to come and take up jobs in Indi, but there's nowhere for them to live. And I needed to do something real using the tools that I had and doing the blooming work to make a dent on that. I'm really proud of that. I've got some other stuff to say.
You should be proud of that, Helen. That's really incredible to have people in there advocating for rural and regional Australia. And
can I tell you something else? When I moved these amendments in the House, now this is where it's interesting to watch Parliament, and there's lots said. You'll see lots of rubbish, false advertising about independence and how we vote. I
did want to ask about what people say versus what they do, because if you look up the voting record, the current member for Wannon almost always votes against help for rural and regional Australia.
Well, I came into the House in good faith and moved amendments to this incredibly serious piece of legislation, and guess what? Nobody from the coalition, no National Party member, no Liberal Party member, no regional member of Parliament supported my amendments. So they went through with them voting no, or even worse than that, not showing up. So, I just think when I sort of read this, like it's kind of so exasperating. I think really what people should be looking at is not what you vote yes for, actually. I mean, you need to look at that too, but what are people voting no to? I mean, that's a serious question. Why would you not vote with the member for Indi, a serious, hard-working rural independent, on a good piece of legislation? And the reason is because you vote with the party. You're not voting with your electorate. You're voting with the party. That's just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, and I think the proof that people appreciate this is the fact that you've been re-elected from your first term. You've served 2 terms now. Cathy McGowan before you as an independent. You made history following on from her. So 4 elections and terms now, Indi's had an independent. They must be pretty chuffed with how it's been going to keep voting independents back in. Can you tell us a few of the things that, I guess, from 2013 when Cathy was first elected, that you've been able to achieve tangibly based out of that listening? Because Indi, rural and regional Victorian seat, was 80 years in the making. It was a safe seat for 80 years.
It was a safe seat for 80 years, but minus this one fun fact, that one year, the sitting Liberal member forgot to put their papers in for the election. And a bit like, what happened in New South Wales, in the state election. Anyway, so a Labor person won it for 3 years, but they didn't last long. They were
the technicality rule.
The
old Stephen Bradbury rule.
Yeah, well, again, same old thing. Never take it for granted. Do your homework. Do the paperwork. Cross your T's, dot your I's.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, look. Yes, of course. Let me tell you. I think this is well known because I think you've been spruiking this a bit actually, Alex, about mobile phone coverage, telecommunications.
Well, someone came into the hub today. Well, actually, on the street stall, someone came up. They live just outside of Camperdown, and they're up a tree trying to get a phone call in Australia.
Well, that's actually me. There's only one spot in my garden. I've fixed it for everyone else except ourselves.
Bloody integrity. It really hurts you sometimes having honesty and transparency and integrity.
Yeah. I think though, what Cathy heard loud and clear through the kitchen table conversations of 2013 was, one of the just most exasperating handbrakes to prosperity in our regional seat. And let's face it, this is what we want. We want thriving, prosperous, wonderful rural communities. And, we are that, right? Like we are, but we could be so much more if we could just blooming well get a telephone to work and have fast internet. So this was a massive issue in Indi. So Cathy then found out that one of the councils in Indi was actually doing all right on some of the government grants to improve telecommunications, and that was in Mansfield. This is after she was elected. So she got together with Mansfield, and there's 9 local government areas in Indi, and she formed something called the Indi Telecommunications Advisory Group. And said, okay, everybody, we've got to stop competing with each other. We've got to work together. Let's work together. Let's find out how, let's put in really great grant applications to the Commonwealth. And we need base stations. Like, as you probably know, my electorate's very hilly. I've got the beautiful alpine areas, and it's pretty challenging. So Kathy started doing that and started getting success in getting new base stations funded. And then when Kathy retired and I took on the baton, I continued this advisory group, and we work closely with Telstra, Optus, NBN. We bring them all in, just get around the table and say, right, where are the problems? We've mapped it all. In fact, I was laughing. In the last election, the Labor Party said, we're going to map where the mobile phone black spots are and we're going to put this special satellite on top of Australia Post vans. I go, all right. Well, you don't need to do it in Indi because we've already done it. We already know. So I've continued that, and we are the most successful electorate in Victoria for federal funding for telecommunications. We have 50 new towers and 15 upgraded towers, so 65 improvements. We've got business nodes, fast internet coming to Wodonga, Wangaratta, Benalla. Even the little town of Harrietville, which had absolutely nothing, has now got a grant for fibre to the home, and it has just been transformative. There's more work to do. Every time I talk about this, I always get about 20 phone calls saying, yeah, but you haven't fixed our black spot yet, Helen. So, look, of course there's more work to do. And coming into this election, I was just out in one of our tiny towns in the mountains, really bushfire prone, with my next policy, which is around guaranteeing 24-hour power backup to our mobile towers, because we all know that when they get knocked out with floods or fires, and you've just had appalling fires, of course, over in the Grampians, like you lose all your telecommunications, and a lot of it is because the power's been knocked out to the tower. So
and right when you need it the most, it's the most crucial time. Yeah. Yep.
So that was a really, brass tacks, super important, practical piece of work that we did, and it's been really very, very successful.
Absolutely. When you're talking to people about the power that independents can have, that's a really great tangible example of that one. I think 40% of federal funding for towers went to the electorate of Indi out of all of Victoria.
I know,
it's really
and people
incredible.
keep saying to me, oh, Helen, what are you doing? How are you managing to do that? Because again, we've got this awful mentality that's evolved in Australia that the only way you get stuff is if you get a dirty big pork barrel. And I really hate pork barrelling. It is just disgraceful. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. It's completely unfair, and it doesn't actually address our serious infrastructure problems. And I just keep saying to people, play by the rules, but actually know the rules and do the work. Put in the submissions. Actually do the work, and have a member of parliament who will then go and advocate for you, who'll then, take it into the House, who'll go to the Minister, who'll write a private member's bill, who'll just do all the work. And together it's amazing when the community works with their Member of Parliament. It's amazing what you can do together. It really is.
Yeah, and that's something that Cathy McGowan passed on when she visited Wannon, and that was, she said, I felt a bit embarrassed at the time. I was at the front, she pointed at me and said, it's not Alex's job to fix your problems. Yeah. He's there to represent you in order to get these problems fixed. And it is the work being done by the community to help not only get an independent elected, but actually solve a few of the issues that you're talking about, Helen. And one of the amazing things on my visit to Canberra that I got to walk into your office, but there was barely a seat available because it was full of volunteers from Indi visiting the corridors of power. Can you tell us about how volunteering for an independent member, it doesn't just stop at election time, it continues, and it shows that community members will continue to have a say in their electorate into the future.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this. I can get a bit corny, and when people say, oh, Helen, it must be so lonely being an independent, I go, if you're a community independent, you never walk alone. And the thing is that, I can see many of you in orange Alex T-shirts, and you do have a responsibility that if Alex is elected, you don't dump him, right? Like, you've got to stick with him, because it is a lot of work, and you will do better together. In my time as the member for Indi, I've had 137 everyday people from Indi come up and spend a week with me in Canberra, and that includes 2 years of the Parliament being shut down during COVID, so we would have had probably another 100. There are 137 people who have had the whole parliamentary gig demystified for them. So this notion of what people think Parliament is, or what they think advocacy is, we do this massive week-long immersion explainer. So they see how lobbyists work, they see how the policy sausage is made. They help me because if you're an independent, you have a tiny little staff, you don't have a great big party doing all the work for you.
Yeah, legislatively as well. I couldn't believe the. Not only do you have less employees than people in a party, but they get paid less as well.
Oh yeah, they get paid less, on every measure, And since I've been an MP, I've made 466 speeches, moved 71 amendments to 12 bills. I met with Minnie, told you that. I've had 13 successful amendments. I've made 8 budget submissions. I've done 19 private members' bills. Like, it just goes on. And this work is helped by our volunteers who come into the office, and we set them research tasks. They help us. But the most important thing is they learn about how do you get stuff done. And they go back to their community, and they might be CFA members, or they might be school teachers, or they might be childcare workers, whatever they are. They work it out, and then they work with their community groups to get stuff done. It's so powerful.
It's
and I know I would not be the member for Indi if I had not volunteered for Kathy in Canberra.
Yeah, and just quietly, where do they stay when they go to Canberra?
Well, here's the thing, because Canberra's really expensive, right? Like those Canberra hotels during sitting week, you could be staying in New York City. Like the prices are mad. And we're really conscious, rural and regional electorate, we know that our average income's lower than a metropolitan area, and we also know that we want to get young people up into Canberra as well. So we do a couple of things. We talked to David Pocock, who I know you know, Senator Pocock. Of course, is Canberra based, and he has loads of volunteers as well. And we said, David, do you reckon there'd be any chance any of your volunteers might be interested in kind of homestaying some of our volunteers? And like
this is just the cutest political fact.
I know, right? Like the next day, we had, I don't know, I think it was 30 or 40 people. Where's Phil? He knows this. Yep, is that right? I'm not. 46. 46 families said, yeah, we'd love to have the people of Indi. And so they host people, and our folks come up and they bring a bottle of the best Northeast Jurif or something with them. And then this old lady in our community, she rang up my office and said, oh, Helen, I love what you're doing with this volunteer caper. I'd love to help some young people get up. So she donated money for a scholarship, so that pays for petrol for young people to come up. And it really is the most wonderful thing. And as I said, I wouldn't be the member for Indi if I hadn't done this, although when I first volunteered for Kathy, Alex, do you know what I thought?
What's that?
Glad I'm not Kathy.
Oh, wow. And look at that. Look at that. Well, I must admit, I was driving home from a particularly big day of campaigning by myself in the car. I think it was from Ararat back to Warrnambool, 1 hour and 45 minutes across the electorate. And I think I said to myself, this is 2022, my second run, it's like, Alex, no matter what future you says, never do this again. And here I am now, not listening to my past self. So, but it is particularly amazing. Thank you so much for people who've written down questions on coasters. I'm about to ask Helen that. But before we get to that, Helen, I did want to ask, because this particular election is quite unique, because recently the major parties have teamed up in order to change the campaign finance laws to stack the deck against independence. And I got to tell you, just personally, it's a very weird feeling to walk to your letterbox, have a photo of yourself photoshopped next to Anthony Albanese, and texts from some nefarious people in Melbourne saying, "Ooh, be careful, Alex is going to vote with Anthony Albanese." You go that from your mailbox and you put it in the bin, and you go inside, turn on the TV, and the Liberal Party has voted with Anthony Albanese to give themselves more taxpayer money come election time, and make it a lot more difficult for independents like yourself or myself in Wannon, or the dozens and dozens of independents running around Australia to actually get elected. Can you tell us how that happened in Canberra and how important it is for us to ensure that these rules are altered to make sure that we have a fair and free democracy?
Yeah, well, this is really something to worry about. And, I've talked a bit about the press gallery before, but I don't get really mad very often, but when I do, the press gallery usually ring up my staff and say, "Gee, Helen's seemed pretty cross out there today. What's going on?" And the electoral reform legislation is one of those pieces of legislation, because this could have been really fantastic legislation. Like, it really could have been. We need to get big money out of politics. I drove with my husband Phil today from Wangaratta, and I don't know how many Trumpet of Patriot billboards we passed on the way, you know.
Or Trumpet of Parrots, I think, as Clive Palmer accidentally called it.
That's right. I would have loved to have been in the room when they were coming up with that name. But anyway, look, Clive Palmer is the one cited as being the big, you know, watch out for Clive. But I know for sure that what the two major parties are most concerned about is not Clive Palmer. They're worried about independence, actually, because we are seeing credible people with big community following doing really significant work, and the nation's paying attention, and the major parties are really pretty worried about us. It's such a pity that they are, because I mean, I just, of course I would say this, but I just think that we're bringing the democracy back into the parliament and working with them, whoever may be in government, actually helping them to do better. But it's really the independence that they're worried about. So you kind of know that when a bill is floated and they have these exposure drafts, and you have these, you know, you have parliamentary committees looking at things, and then everything goes quiet. And you don't see the actual bill, and then you start hearing little rumours around the corridors that there's a meeting going on between the Special Minister of State, that's Senator Farrell, who had carriage of this bill, and Mr Dutton, and we all know that something is going to be, something bad is going to happen, because the two major parties, the opposition and the government, don't agree on very much, but they both were unanimous that we should have donation caps. I couldn't agree more. We should. You shouldn't be able to give millions of dollars. One single person should not. We should have spending caps. Couldn't agree more. Shouldn't be spending millions of dollars to win a seat. We should have transparency of political donations. I've been doing that since I was elected. Not that hard. I put on my website, the reason why I get newspaper stories about who's donated to Helen Haines is because I tell you.
That's the amazing thing.
Like, you know, like super sleuth journalists, how'd you find that out? Well, I looked at your website, and tell me, what about the candidate running for the Labor Party or the Liberal Party or the Greens? What did you find? Or the Greens actually show this. Tell me who's donating to their campaign. Oh, we don't know, because they don't have to tell us until months after the election. I said, surely that's the story. Anyway, here's the thing. Like, it's a complicated set of rules, but at the end of the day, what we have got legislated is that there will be donations caps, there will be spending caps, but there's a get out of jail clause for the major parties, because it's a big number. I agree, it is a big number. Like, $800,000 is the limit you can spend on an electorate. But if you're a candidate for the major party, your major party can actually spend heaps more on top of that. They've got $90 million extra across the nation to spend, so long as they don't put the name of the candidate. So they can blanket the electorate in Labor or Liberal Party, big billboards, posters, social media, newspaper ads, you name it, the whole lot, YouTube, TikTok, God knows whatever else is out there. And that's okay, but the independent cannot do that. They must stick to the cap. And the other thing is, on the donations, is that an individual can give $50,000 per year to a Member of Parliament or and in a seat. But you can also give $50,000 to every major party branch in every state and territory every year. So this is just bringing millions of dollars on top of what an independent can. And it even gets better than that, because you, the taxpayers, us, we're now going to donate even more. So for the taxpayers, we used to be paying $3.90 per vote to a successful Member of Parliament. Once they got over a certain percentage of votes, that's now gone up, I think it's $5.20, so millions of dollars of taxpayers' money. And guess who that advantages? The major parties, because they run candidates in every seat. So, and on top of that, there's even more. There's more.
There's more.
There's more. There's an administrative fee that the taxpayer is paying, and that goes to every Member of Parliament, irrespective of whether there's any economies of scale by having, multiple members of the same party, and that is that's legislated as well, even though in the states and territories where they've changed the rules, they've said, you know what, you can't get an administrative fee for every member if you've got a major party, but we will be in the federal government. I mean, it is... I've been doing workshops around my community on scams, trying to help people not getting, the hello mum scam on their telephone. But honestly, I have interrogated this legislation really thoroughly. I went into this in good faith, seriously thinking, like, what a dummy, thinking that the major parties were serious about this stuff. But they did this, and what's, and are they proud of it? Well, they must be, because we didn't even get to debate it in full in the House. They would not send it to an inquiry. They guillotined debate in both the House of Reps and the Senate, and we couldn't even speak on it. And if that's the best our democracy can be, from the major parties talking about reform, then I just think we've got to do a whole lot better. And it really is. It's quite frightening, actually.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've done about 20,000 kilometres across the electorate listening to the people of Wannon in order to see their big issues, and not one of them mentioned more of my money to the major parties, please, come election time. So it's interesting where they decided that's a good piece of legislation to ram through at about 10 p.m. at night.
Yeah,
with
again,
no debate.
in the cover of darkness, if you're proud of something, bring it into the House of Representatives and have a full debate. If you want to do something tricky, then you pile it on the agenda late at night and slam it through the Senate. But I do want to say, I want to kind of do a whole mea culpa here, because being an incumbent brings enormous advantages. If you are a member of Parliament, you're already ahead of the game when it comes to any challenger. You've got an office staff, you've got a communications budget, people know your name, and incumbency has not been accounted for in this either. So, we need to level the playing field. I'm the first to admit that, this is my third run for Parliament, and I've got 6 years of track record, and I've got a staff, and I've got 2 officers, and I've got a car to move around the electorate. And if someone's challenging me, who's not from a major party, let's say there was another independent challenging me, they haven't got any of that. So we need to level the playing field. We really do. If we want to get the best people in Parliament, we need to throw the doors open and make it fair.
Yeah, so this election is really important, Helen, to make sure that that's done before these rules take effect at the next election. So let's hear from the actual people of Wannon yourselves for some questions for Helen Haines. What can independents do to improve the situation around childcare and aged care?
Oh, yes.
Which has been quite big, particularly hearing childcare around the electorate in Wannon. I'm not sure how it is in Indi, Helen, but that is something that is... When you describe it as a childcare desert, it doesn't, give you much confidence that parents and families and children are being looked after. Yeah.
Okay. I love this topic. I'm not proud to say that parts of Indi are childcare deserts, and a childcare desert is defined by one childcare place available for 3 children. So 3-to-1 ratio. I think this is, I'm going to sound like Macron now. I do not think I know that lack of childcare is a massive handbrake on rural prosperity. When I talk to people in metropolitan areas, they're not worried about getting a childcare place. They're worried about how much it will cost, because it's a real cost factor in the cities. But out in the country, I have met just hundreds of parents, and I've deliberately done that. I've been calling them the Indi play dates, and I've been running little play groups right across Indi and inviting in parents to talk about this. 2-year waiting lists to get into childcare. I've got psychologists, nurses, doctors, people we need so desperately to be fully employed are working 1 or 2 days a week. They want to be working full time, but they cannot get early education and care. We have people who drive. I've got numerous case studies of this, of people who drive 2 hours to get to childcare. And can you believe it? It's just ridiculous. So what's the reason? What's the problem? Well, part of it is, you all know, because you live in rural and regional Australia, that we have thin markets, and the big private players don't necessarily want to come and set up a childcare centre in a small country town. They might in Warrnambool, they might in Colac perhaps, but they're not going to be in Koroit, are they? Or Mortlake, or maybe Camperdown. So we've got a thin market issue. And we've also, of course, got a workforce issue. we all know that early education and care workers were some of the most underpaid people in Australia, disgraceful actually. Credit where credit's due, the government have addressed that. There's been an uptick in salaries, that's a really good thing. There's also been an increase in fee-free TAFE places to train early education and care teachers, that's a good thing. So that's a start. But I'm really campaigning on, there's some places where you need government intervention, right? Like there's some places where the market fails, where you do need the government to step in, and that is in establishing early education and care centres in some of our smaller parts of rural and regional Australia. Because, again, we can't thrive if we can't have our parents able to work to the full capacity that they wish to. It really is a significant problem. Last night I did a group in Rutherglen with a bunch of young families, asking them, top issues. It was a lay-down misere. Healthcare, access to GPs and childcare. And so this has got to be fixed. It's really got to be fixed. The government have got some pretty reasonable policies on this coming into the next election. As yet, I don't know what the coalition are offering, so I can't kind of do a compare and contrast. But I know that I will be campaigning on this. And there's one other element of this I want to tell you about, because, again, it kind of speaks to being a rural and regional independent. Has anyone got kids or grandkids in out-of-school hours care, that care before school and after school? It's really important for working families. You need to know that your little ones are safe and secure, so that when you finish work at whatever time, you can come and pick them up. We found out that they're often in schools, these, and 7 of our tiny schools just mysteriously were unfunded. We got a phone call from one of them saying, we've just got a letter to say we've got no more funding, we're going to have to shut the doors. This will mean that the 14 families who leave their kids here before and after school care will probably take their kids out of the school to the bigger town where they work. So our school will probably end up closing. Like, this was really serious. So we rang around, found out that there were 7. I went and saw the minister immediately, because we found this out when I was in Parliament. So I went to see Minister Ali and said, "You've got a problem here." Minister said, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, here's the thing." Really didn't know about it. I found out that, in fact, it's competitive funding. I'm thinking, why is this competitive funding when, these people all met the guidelines, they all met the criteria. There is no other option. Like, if this closes, there's nowhere. So anyway, I asked a question in question time. I then really engaged with the Minister's office and found out that, in fact, this funding had been determined by some private consultancy group, hadn't even gone through the department. I just hate to think what's going on here. Anyway, the Minister then said, "Okay, I really get it, you've got a problem. There is this kind of emergency fund." So I got all 7 of them, 1 year's worth of emergency funding, but I'm out there campaigning to say this should not be a competitive grant. This should be straight up available to rural and regional communities.
That's amazing. And here in Wannon, taking a few of those learnings from people who are in the area, and not only getting mobile sort of services for these smaller towns, can do a couple of days a week at different towns, which is really beneficial for parents in those areas, but also funding the Deakin University Childcare Centre of Excellence down in Warrnambool, which will be able to train these people locally. And we know that when there's local training, often they're more likely to stick around in the regional and rural areas. And so there are a few ways that we can do that in this area.
Alex, I didn't talk about aged care. Do you want me to do a quick one on aged care?
Oh, we've got to get some more.
Go, all right. Someone can ask me later about that, because that matters.
Should we? All right, we better.
Okay. All right. I'm going to be faster than Bob Catter. I'm going to do it in 30 seconds. We had the most appalling findings of a Royal Commission into aged care. We all know we have to do better. I think one of the best bipartisan things I've seen in the Parliament is there was a united front on passing legislation for a new Aged Care Act. So that's a big tick to the Parliament. Biggest challenge, of course, again, is workforce, and the biggest challenge that I'm seeing for rural and regional people is including travel in their support at home packages, because there's a whole lot of people who qualify, are assessed, get a support at home package, and then they don't even get it delivered because there's not enough travel in the package for the provider to get out and deliver that at home. So I reckon that's a big one. I think it'd be a big one out here too.
Really well done, Helen. This is about the National Anti-Corruption Commission, which you had a big hand in establishing. It says, for Helen, given your role in the formation of the NACC, how do you think it's going and what changes do you think are needed?
This is a Dorothy Dick story, I reckon. I don't know if any of you happened to read the Saturday paper, but I wrote an op-ed about this a few weeks ago. If you jump on my website, you can see it without having to worry about paywalls. But look, I'm really proud, as I think Brian might have said earlier, Indi really pushed for this. It was so close, you know. The legislation that the National Anti-Corruption Commission is based on is the private members bill that I wrote. So that was considered. I didn't write it by myself. I had a whole bunch of really clever judges who helped me, and this was a big thing that I found out when you went to Parliament. Like, I got into Parliament and nearly started rocking in the corner when I realised I'd promised the people of Indi I was going to, make this National Anti-Corruption Commission happen. I thought, well, I really don't know how to do that. But phone a friend, and this is the thing. Again, if you work with people, I had this bunch of retired judges, just awesome, extraordinary. They were QCs at the time, they're probably all KCs now, but they all came in and helped me, as did Professor AJ Brown from Griffith University, international expert on this stuff. So we did this together, and we wrote a cracking bill. The government, of course, during the previous Parliament, Morrison government, Mr Morrison, when I went to see him, I went to see him lots of times saying, Mr Morrison, you really need to do something about corruption. And just before the election was called, he said, oh, Helen, I don't know why you think this is a big deal. Nobody in Australia thinks this is a big deal. And very politely, I said, I beg to differ, Mr Morrison, I think it is a big deal and many Australians care about it. Anyway, we got to the next Parliament, Labor Party committed to do it, and to their credit they did, but they pulled a Swiftie at the last moment, again to get the agreement. Again, same old thing. You've got to watch out when both the major parties do something on the quiet and then slip it in at the last moment. They knocked out added a really important clause into the National Anti-Corruption Commission legislation, and it's around the transparency of the body, and it's around about you and I and everyone knowing and being able to see a public hearing in an important inquiry. And I've written really strong safeguards about that, because of course we don't want kangaroo courts, of course we don't want people being exposed and found, their reputation's trash. We've got to get all that right, but we had really tight legislation saying that we would have public hearings when in the public interest, with a whole lot of other, clauses around it. And then out of nowhere, Alex, because I knew this legislation inside out, I saw a new clause saying, when in the public interest and in exceptional circumstances. Anyway, I went along and saw the Attorney General, and I said, Attorney General, could you please explain what an exceptional circumstance might be? And he could not give me a definition. He just said, Helen, we've got to get bipartisan support for this, otherwise, in years to come, change of government, they'll kill the whole thing, so it's worth it. You've got to compromise, girl. Anyway, the story goes on, it's too boring to tell. I found myself in the House of Representatives debating the Attorney General for 4 hours on this piece of legislation, me trying to amend it back again. Of course I wasn't successful because no one other than the crossbench wanted it. But every now and then I'm a bit of an evil person, because I knew that the Attorney General wanted to do a big press conference before lunch to be on the television news, and I just kept going until after 12. So,
doing the blooming work.
Doing the blooming work. I knew I wasn't going to win, but I thought I'm going to get this into Hansard by hook or by crook.
Very nicely done. All right, we've got a couple of questions going. How are we for time? Got time for a couple more? We've got Helen Haines in the hometown. We've got to do it. What criteria do you use to evaluate each piece of legislation?
Okay. Boy, is this important, because when you're an independent, you actually have to make a decision on every single piece of legislation. Can you imagine that? And the other thing that people are shocked about is we don't know what we're going to be debating. Like, we're coming into Parliament next week. We often don't get the forward agenda until Thursday or Friday, and we start sitting on the Monday. So what we do is, when legislation is introduced, we do a whole lot of work on it to understand, is there a problem to be solved? here's the kind of criteria really. What's the problem? Is this a problem that needs a new law? What is this law proposing? Is that law supported by good evidence? Is it good governance? Is it ethical? What does it mean for the people of Indi? What does it mean for rural and regional Australia? What does it mean for the nation? They're the questions I ask every single time. I get briefings on every piece of legislation, every single one. I get briefings from ministers, as do the other crossbench members. We're the only people who do. And then my hardworking team, and they're unreal. They're a bunch of young people, passionate, smart. I've got a program of repatriating every kid who's left Indi and done something super special to come back and help me. I've got them in my office, and then we work it through, and we determine, based on that criteria, whether I'm going to support the bill unamended, whether I'm going to try to amend the bill, or whether I'm going to oppose the bill. And I have a rule that if I'm opposing government legislation, then I try as almost at 100%. Sometimes I haven't actually, not at 100%, but almost. If I'm going to oppose it, I will stand up in the Parliament and explain why. Because I think that's important. Like, the government hold the agenda, so if I'm going to get in their way, then I need to explain to the people why. And if there's an opportunity to amend it, like some legislation's pretty good, but there's stuff missing, like we talked about with the housing bills. So if you spot it, then, be a good parliamentarian. Try and fix it.
Absolutely. And I guess a nice little final question for you, Helen. How do we engage the unengaged?
Yeah.
And I found that in my first run for Parliament was a 5-week campaign, and I wanted to engage particularly young people, but everyone.
Yeah.
Which is why I presented my policies via interpretive dance. So it might be a bit more palatable than the average politician droning on and saying the same things. But, we need to get people involved in paying attention, but also involved because you wouldn't have become a member, nor would Cathy McGowan, and I certainly won't become a member without engaging people in their own process. And so, how have you found some great strategies to engage those people who are potentially not as... Oh, she's good.
Yeah, well, I think this is kind of a nice bookend because this is what we're doing right now. And I think, I hope there's people who've come in here who would normally vote for a major party. Like, I hope there's people who are just up for having a listen and up for being in an environment where it's okay not to be on team. I think, I was talking to the kids this afternoon and I was saying my grandfather, Johnny Ryan, was secretary of the then Country Party down here. My family traditionally would have voted Country Party, and when I left home, I voted like Mum and Dad. I just thought that's what you did, and I didn't kind of have those discussions and debates until later. But I think part of engaging people is to say it's okay to disagree and that we still respect each other. So creating a safe place for people who are up for it. But then, of course, there's folks because who've got so much going on in their life, like they're trying to find a place to rent, or they're escaping family violence, or they had a hard time at school and their literacy's not so great. Engaging with those people is really critical, and one of the best ways to do it is to go door knocking. And I never thought there's so many things I've been scared about doing, like so many things. I could write a book about things that Helen Haines is scared of, but did anyway. Door knocking was one of them, and door knocking is the most sensational way. You don't know who's behind that door. Go out into areas where folks are doing it tough, and it's the most wonderful way to engage with another human being, because so many of those folks say to me and say to my volunteers, and like Alex, we've got hundreds of volunteers out doing this, they say, thank you for asking me. Because we knock on the door and don't say vote Helen Haines, or I presume you don't say vote one Alex Dyson as the opening line.
And I make a point and annoy Steph a little bit, because I say we're not there to win votes, we're there to make people feel heard.
Yeah.
And the votes come as they flow naturally off someone being felt like he's someone who listens to me.
Absolutely. So I think the critical part in engaging the unengaged is to actually be curious, ask questions, find out who's not at the table, and go find them. and
Set a place
just
for
be kind. Like, don't be awful. Be kind, and it's amazing how people will work with you then.
Well, I think we've just about run out of time for that. We're going to get Steph up to let you know how you can be involved and be the change that you want to see in your electorate. But I think it's fair to say, Helen, you're a massive inspiration to me. Yourself and Kathy are a massive inspiration to a lot of people in this room. The fact that, we have an orange Kelpie taking a lead from Indi and what you were able to achieve and continue achieving is really incredible. The independent movement is truly standing on the shoulders of giants and being able to see that it is possible to have a say in our community. So thank you so much for coming back to your old school and giving another speech to when you were school captain. Thank you for having us, and please give it up with some cheers for Helen Haines.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you so much. You're amazing, Helen. Thank you. Helen Haines,
Thanks,
everyone.
folks.
Authorised by Alex Dyson, Warrnambool. Authorised by Alex Dyson, Warrnambool.